everybody, it is the Working Brother back at you with another talk yet again. It's Matt. Matt, how you doing? Welcome back.
Hey, it was a pleasure, Stefan. Always a pleasure.
We've had you on before, but for people who might be stumbling upon this video as a first, you want to clue them into who you are, what you do?
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot to remember. I'd rather you cycle through it than me.
I mean, I do a few things. I write on geopolitics. I've written some books on history, and I'm the director of a foundation called the Rising Tide Foundation, which I co-founded with my wife back in 2019 to deal with the collapse in education and cultural standards in the West. So, I mean, those are the main things. I'm also the senior fellow at the American University in Russia, which is run by a Russian physicist, Dr. Edward Lazansky. Yeah, there's other things, but those are, I guess, the kernel, the essentials.
All right, excellent. And I invited you on to see if you'd like to talk about anything specific. I wanted to get into some of the things that are going on in Canada that you might have eye on more than us from way over the pond. But you instead sent me along something about multipolar stuff. Do you want to get into the multipolar aspect of things before we get into the Blackpilled community?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, I this is part of a series. I already did last week. I did something on nominalism, or sorry, it was called Capitalism, Communism, Feudalism, Why Nominalism Makes Us Fools. That's the article I did last week as part one of the series, just to try to get across that, like, a lot of the people in the even the alternative media community are starting to feed on a lot of Five Eyes, MI6, CIA, FBI Kool-Aid that is rehashing a lot of the tropes that were part of the fear porn operation to get Westerners to basically shit their pants in fear of big bad commies of Russia and China throughout the entirety of the Cold War. Before McCarthy, during McCarthy, after McCarthy, the whole thing was tattle on your neighbor if you suspect that your neighbor is speaking about anti-imperialism in Philadelphia or Detroit or New York, wherever. The America became a bit of an FBI-run police state with neighbors tattling on neighbors, children tattling on their parents. And people make fun today, of the evils of the Chinese cultural revolution with the young Red Guard anarchists, and that was a messy disaster in my opinion. But that being said, there's a citation from the Bible, from the book of Matthew, that reads something to the effect that one should not criticize the splinter in your brother's eye until you've taken out the log in your own. And there's a lack of humility and lack of self-reflection about the evil that overcame us during the Cold War. And so because of that, people have been falling into these tropes that require overly simplistic labels and names to be like just attached to the fact that we are the label free democratic capitalist West. China is authoritarian communist. So, and so these labels are so overly simplistic, since China has, a more thriving entrepreneurial class. They've got billionaires out of the wazoo. They've got more patents being registered. There's so many points that would have Karl Marx probably turning in his grave in horror to demonstrate that other than the name Communist Party of China, there is nothing really all that ideologically communist about China per se. And in fact, I should have said this in that article, but when you take the actual Chinese symbols for what is translated into English as Chinese Communist Party, it's something to the effect of like the civilizational state of the heavenly kingdom or something really not rooted in any type of ideology. Not communist-y at all, no. And the same thing for the West. I mean, we call ourselves, capitalist, democratic, and it's like, well, did we vote for any of the wars that have destroyed the lives of millions of people over the past?
Forget the wars, just the electoral college as an idea is like quite undemocratic, if you ask me.
Oh, on so many levels. Yeah, I mean, the majority of the people and institutions who make policy that affects the lives of all Americans and Canadians are not elected. The the operators of the Bilderberger Group who shape the economic policies, who have taken over our governments through their different auxiliaries and proxies over the course of the last 60 years. Huh?
Yeah, I'm just pointing to a link that I'm going to put up to our previous talk about the Bilderbergers.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, I mean, these people aren't elected. I mean, the deep state operatives who are, ideologically trained Rhodes Scholars, conditioned in Oxford, and then deployed back to operate a managerial class of technocrat over the course of 80 years of this happening. I mean, since FDR died, this thing really took over rampantly across the United States. They were not elected, so we're dealing with the fact that we're resting on laurels we don't deserve by saying we are this free, democratic, capitalist West under threat and under attack. So, I wrote that article to just try to take some of the wind out of the sails of the hubris of those who like to oversimplify and introduce that, no, everybody's got a deep state. China's got their own deep state issues that they've had to deal with for decades and decades. The difference between us and them is they've actually, acted like real mensch and have waged a war much more effectively against their deep state traitors and fifth columnists than we have, whereas we have let them, these traitors, take control. So before getting freaked out about evil Chinese supervillain Chi-Coms, let's clean up our own act and then reevaluate where the problems are actually arising from. And it's not China.
Your message is get rid of the communists at home, huh?
Well, that's the thing, right? There's a thing, and I try to get across this. I've been playing with this for the past few weeks. Is this fun concept that you have? Capitalism is not one thing. It's communism or socialism is not one thing. And looking at history, you could find that you have authentic capitalists. When America acted its best, it was acting under what you could consider authentic, genuine capitalism. And there's feudal capitalism, the type of capitalism of the British East India Company or the City of London that acts like they're all for money and profit, but in reality they were always for keeping global systems of control and enslavement under the veneer of seeking for profit. But it's not. That's like the Davos Klaus Schwabian idea of capitalism. It's not real capitalism. They want control. Even they want to do things that are going to kill their customers, which is bad for business, and destroy the means of producing capital by going for green energy systems, which is again bad for business and bad. That's anti-capitalism, but it's feudalism. And if you look at it historically, you've got also feudal socialism and authentic socialism. Like socialism is like the authentic type, I would say, or anytime you've had a leader or a movement calling itself socialist, but having an authentic anti-imperial outlook, fighting empire, pushing to enforce social values onto the behavior of monetary systems. That's what America used to be as well. And then you have the feudal socialists, the Fabian Society, George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell type of socialists who are actually feudalists using the cover of a socialist sort of honey covering to attract the abused labor and poor in order to weaponize the masses and really just use them to destroy the means of their own existence by becoming a mob that could be used to overthrow a government and a revolution that is for purely geopolitical purposes, but ultimately run by people who hate those poor and weak and abused that they say that they care about so deeply. They're misanthropic anti-humanists. So, there's a nuance.
No, you don't say. The elites hate us? Wow, man. Breaking all kinds of news here. No, but seriously, I wanted to get into the whole multipolar world as controlled opposition. How do you term the multipolar world? Is it a synonym for BRICS? Like, is BRICS becoming a synonym for the multipolar world? Like, to get that out of the way first, like to define what a multipolar world is?
Well, I think let's remove the details and just get it conceptually. First and foremost, multipolar is usually something used in contrast to unipolar. One or many, you have a choice. In this case, it's about governance. Where do we want international and policy making where do we want the authority for international law and the behavior of human systems to emerge from? One center of command, that's the unipolar idea, sort of one grouping that would then tell the world, kind of like a Roman imperial emperor, of bygone years, that would then tell the entire system how to behave under the will of a prima inter pares, a first among equals. Or do you want multiple centers that could coexist, in which international law is shaped? Whether it basically, it wouldn't just be one pole; it would be many different areas representing different civilizational states, identities, nation states. And in that case, that system would be much more in harmony with the concept of the sovereign nation state system. Although in some, it wouldn't purely be only sovereign nation state. Like, it's not like every sovereign nation state would wield the same amount of influence. Eritrea, it wouldn't wield the same amount of influence necessarily in real physical economic terms as, let's say, Ethiopia, which is very close to it, but a much stronger nation. Same thing for, like, Ethiopia wouldn't wield as much power as an orb, as a gravitational center of action than, let's say, China, which has a greater power of production, a greater power of doing things, and thus greater influence. Like any orbit, a bigger planet would have a bigger gravitational force than a smaller, like a moon but everybody would have a play and a say within the construct of what policies are defined. So that's sort of the more abstract idea of multipolar, many poles versus one of command, and authority for law. Is the BRICS co-equal to multipolarism? No, I wouldn't say so, because the BRICS is still itself an underdefined, an underformed idea, finding expression. So it is an expression of multipolarism in a more advanced way than we have it anywhere in the West, which is much more under the control of a London Wall Street central banking dictatorship, including all of the European Union area, North America, mostly Canada and the US, very much under one centralized control. That's so, like, the countries of Europe, not only do they not really have much of a say in their economic destiny, but the policies that have been put on them from the Lisbon Treaty, the Maastricht Treaty that created the euro, the entire system of deregulating private finance to create this multi-headed beast of private capital, which has more power than sovereign nation states. They're doing things that are involving the necessary murder of Europeans, the basis upon which Europeans require energy and food to live. That's being consciously undermined. Same thing for the Americans, with the takedown of viable energy sources, viable food production through things like the COP27 mandates to shut down 30% of our agriculture or fertilizer use in order to save nature. And then, instead of eating farmed goods like we've been doing for thousands of years, we're supposed to eat bugs from cricket farms like they have in Canada now, the world's biggest edible cricket farm. That's supposed to be the new type of food. Oh yeah, that's what we've given to the world. That's Canada's gift. So that's supposed to be the good thing. Shut down food production, shut down viable energy, replace it with windmills, solar panels, and then eat bugs to stop the climate.
Supposedly, there's synthetic meat farm being or factory, whatever you want to call it, being made here in Serbia. Is the latest news that I come across locally. So yeah, woohoo.
Well, I don't see any. I'm a pro technologist. So for me, I don't see anything intrinsically bad about lab grown meat or GMOs or things like that. What I see as problematic is the immoral desire to kill us by a death cult that wants to, like, infuse their values into all systems that we rely upon. And so you could imagine if you had, like, an actual moral just type of, like, a world where justice was active, the type of technology that one could create from GMOs, as far as crops that, can be more hardy, more durable in bad climate, or tomatoes could be grown that are like 10 times more vitamin rich than
This is a
tomatoes
comedy show. Yeah, you're right.
it's possible,
It would be,
dude, but honestly, it's possible. They just don't care about those things.
If only I had that meme handy, like what the world would look like if we had like leaders who were who were good for us. Yeah, no comment. What can I say? Yeah, the technology is there. Like all technology, like a gun, can be used in a good or in a bad way. But the point is that, like you say, it's all been undermined by, or subverted, I should say, by evil forces. So,
yeah,
the whatever meat they're printing is definitely not good for you.
No, exactly. No, they exactly. They no, for sure. If anything, it might have things that are going to increase your chances of dying earlier than you should have, or consuming some weird CRISPR tech mRNA material that we didn't want to take into our body through a needle might find a new pathway into our systems. As I've been watching some recent presentations that are disturbing through these. Anyway, that's a whole.
Yeah, that's
we're
a whole.
Talking about like why we don't want to be black-pilled. And
yeah, but let me just give a quick shout out to everyone who's bought me a coffee, since they've convinced me to open this buy me a coffee thing. It's worked well. A couple of people have bought me a coffee. I appreciate that. Coffee makes the show run. Also, big shout out to the Patreons. If you've been a Patreon, thank you. If you're not yet, you can check me out there. All right, now that housekeeping is out of the way, let's get into the Blackpilled scene, or the Blackpilled idea. This is from Working Brothers Instagram. It's a little chart. It says blue pill, things are okay. Red pill, things are not okay. Black pill, nothing is okay. White pill, nothing is okay, and that's okay. Clear pill, it is what it is. And then there's my fucking stance, I don't give a fuck. Basically. But no, also find the Working Brother on Instagram. Lots of interesting stuff. Yeah, Matt, tell us about what a black pill is, and why we shouldn't be black-pilled.
Well, I mean, black-pilled, I think everyone who's watching knows what this is. So I'm not going to define what black-pilled means. And I think you did a pretty good job.
You should, because we've got all kinds of viewers from everywhere.
You did it perfectly fine with that meme. That's it. It's just like, it's the idea that there's no hope. There's never been hope. Everything is controlled opposition. Everything that appears to be hopeful is actually just the oligarchy trying to give you false hope in order to take it away and break you emotionally. Slave. Go back to, and it becomes almost like a little bit of a warm blanket, reinforcing my sense of being impotent and thus having no real responsibility, which usually tends to come with knowledge of solutions. Like if your house is on fire and you're one of the few people who have an idea of what the pathway is to get the kids out of the house, safely through this window that people are not thinking about, well, that puts a moral weight of responsibility on you to, risk getting burned, but really trying to help and save lives. If you don't believe in any pathway out of the burning house, well, you can't be held accountable by yourself or by anybody for just, sitting back in anger. Yeah,
I can't help but laugh. But you mentioned morals. I don't know where you live, but like I haven't seen that much morals in today's society anywhere.
It's a rare breed. It's a rare bird. These morals, but
yeah,
but they're around. But so I guess some of the thing that sort of flows upon what we were formerly talking about with the BRICS. Here's one thing I've been getting a lot of people tell me, because I tend to be, when the BRICS nations do something good, I tend to champion that. I'm like, yeah, good for you, good. And people, I've gotten this in many angry emails. People who say, "Oh, don't you know the BRICS comes from Goldman Sachs and Jim O'Neill from Goldman Sachs in 2001, who put forth the design for the very BRICS that you say are good. Now, first of all, I'm not saying the BRICS are all members of the BRICS are equally awesome. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that there aren't battles that are more or less won in various countries who are part of the BRICS, involving the same London, Wall Street, Davos, fifth columnists trying to subvert their countries from within as traitors, just like we have. I'm not saying that that's not there. But as a whole, yeah, right now the BRICS nations, which is growing from the original Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. South Africa joined in 2011, and there's something like I just read an article going through the likelihood of another 40 members, another 40 nations who have expressed their intention, their desire to be members, on top of the various institutions affiliated with the BRICS, like the BRICS Development Bank, with its head office in Shanghai, currently being run by Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil, which is increasingly part of an obvious de-dollarization, which is underway. Does it mean that there's going to be a new BRICS currency all that quickly just popping up, as some have said, who really see this in a simplistic way? No, I don't think so. I think it's more messy than that. Like, there's a lot of like cheerleaders who are a little bit, I was talking about the over simplists who try to label socialism or capitalism as this one overly simplistic thing and then hate it or love it. It's the same thing for the multipolar thing. There's a lot of people who will become raw cheerleaders, like almost like BRICS QAnonies, where you had these people around Trump who were like, it's all part of the plan. If something bad happens,
BRICS-anon.
BRICS-anon, yeah.
We coined it here. For the record, we coined it here.
Okay, all right. This is the guy you have to pay to copyright, or if you want to use it. Yeah. But there's a little bit of BRICS-anoniness going on, admittedly, which turns off more, I think, critical-minded cynics who are like, well, you say the BRICS is good, but look, Goldman Sachs wrote the plan that created the BRICS framework back 20 plus years ago. So aren't you falling for the trap, fool? So that's the black-pilled voice versus, let's say, I guess you would have called was it the white-pilled? Everything's bad, but that's okay, or something, or it's all part of. I don't know.
Let me
the more naive utopian white-pilled person. Well, nothing is okay, and that's okay. See, there's a lack of nuance even in that pyramid. You need another layer of the pyramid that involves.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Maybe that could be more. Yeah, that could be it. It's a bit more pragmatic. Yeah, I guess so. Okay. Yeah, let's go with is what it is. So the battle between the white and the black is an artificial battle from people who are overly simplistic in either direction. It's all good, or it's all bad. And I think the is what it is thing that might be more open to the reality, the nuance filled reality of life. So okay, let's look at that now. In this new essay that I just wrote on the Multipolar Alliance, which it's called "Is the Multipolar Alliance Controlled Opposition?" It puts a lot of time talking about the BRICS. Well, first of all, Jim O'Neill from Goldman Sachs didn't invent the BRICS. The BRICS was already taking form in 1997, 98, 99, when Primakov was working with Jiang Zemin of China and various leaders, including the leadership of Iran at that time, who were calling for a dialogue of civilizations. Pope John Paul II was brought into these discussions, calling for his program for development as the new name of peace. And the whole, at the time, this is, the Pope who had a lot of problems, but he also survived an assassination attempt, and especially in the 80s was a more potent anti-imperialist in his own right, but he got weaker and weaker as time rolled on. And now the papacy is pretty much a Jesuit-run death cult masquerading as Christianity, but it's not. But you had this whole thing moving, and Primakov, I think, was the guiding light, the guy who really talent searched a younger Putin and recognized his capabilities as a troubleshooter. He was the former prime minister of Russia during the dark days of the 1990s, a high-level intellect. And he initiated something very important, which involved the Russia-India-China alliance that was grouping into a real intercivilizational power center by 1998-99. The G20 grew out of the process he put into motion. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization grew out of the process he put into motion. And so I think there was factions within the smarter groupings of the oligarchy who could see where the wind was blowing and recognized that what Zbigniew Brzezinski said in 1997 was true, that the only thing that could threaten the New World Order, which is an Anglo-American hegemonic global order forever, the only threat that Zbigniew pointed out was the possibility of a China-Russia-Iran alliance. If that were to bring in eventually a more sovereign India, that would be...
You forgot North Korea.
Yeah, I mean, North Korea it's a funny one. Anyway, yeah. But I think that certain people in his crowd could see where the wind was blowing, and they were like, well, if you can't beat it, try to at least subvert it, influence it from within. That's an ancient tried and true technique of empire. Co-opt it, so Jim O'Neill was assigned the role of trying to create a business model for the BRICS. At the time, his model was premised around an extrapolation of monetarist arguments of profit, especially around Brazil's biofuel market, which was making a lot of money, but biofuels is an anti-human insanity. I mean, the idea of taking corn and burning it while we have mass starvation on the earth is insane. It's a desire to financially incentivize the burning of food. But that's what the Brazil economy was making a lot of money on, especially under the control of the Santander Bank, one of the Rothschild inter-alpha banks, which had a vastly dominant role to play in the Brazilian economy of that time. So that was sort of the Achilles heel that O'Neill had as his great idea. Let's just slip in this Trojan horse, this Achilles heel time bomb of speculation, Brazil, into the otherwise already existent alliance that had been growing around Russia, China, and India. So that became BRICS instead of RICS. And then that went on for about a decade until South Africa joined. South Africa as well has no shortage of Cecil Rhodes oriented agents. The Roundtable movement was very active and still is very active in South Africa. The apartheid structures didn't fully leave, and the apartheid, South African state was always loyal to the City of London Central Command of the world. So there was a victory with Nelson Mandela, but it wasn't a full victory. Just like the American Revolution was not a full victory. The British loyal traitors masquerading as American patriots always stayed behind after 1776, and this is the origin. If you want to look at where does Wall Street emerge from, the skull and bones of Yale, what were the Freemasonic outfits that created and established this thing? From the British loyal opium families of America that were always working with the British East India Company in the 19th century to make their ill-begotten profits out of this global British Empire strategy of stuffing opium down the throats of the Chinese, So this is the thing with South Africa, right? But you also have an authentic America and you have an authentic South Africa. You got people who care about the actual deeper traditions of Africa as an anti-colonial, deep, beautiful, ancient civilization. So I think Jacob Zuma was an honorable guy, and South Africa was brought on. But if you look at everything that economically, politically, culturally has been animating the dominant thinking of China, of Russia, also increasingly of Brazil and South Africa, who are the weaker sort of two members of the alliance. Maybe it's Brazil has seen a little bit more pushback in the recent year or so from some of the Western directed fifth columnists. But point being is they're weaker and not nearly as strong as Russia and China as far as economic and political and cultural sovereignty are concerned. But their policy is increasingly being animated by things that Jim O'Neill and Goldman Sachs detested. It's not so much speculating on biofuels that are animating the portfolios of the BRICS or their economic thinking. It's increasingly building bigger and bigger infrastructure modeled on what China has done, instead of what Goldman Sachs is saying that should be done, which is force investments to be tied to 5, 10, 20, 50-year projects that are going to have the effect of increasing the real value and real productive powers of labor of nations and of the members within the nation, citizens, over time by building high-speed rail, building water sanitation systems, building even the soft infrastructure, the educational grids needed to train engineers in regions that have been abused and have been kept ignorant. You have to do these things. So that's what we're seeing as far as what is animating the nations that are affiliated increasingly with, and I would say less the BRICS is like a convenient platform around which nations can go and plan and talk together. It's increasingly, there are institutions, like I said, the BRICS Development Bank, which was supposed to be an offensive bank, like a real alternative to the IMF and the World Bank, which have been the monopolies for global international lending to most nations of the world for 80 years. So originally, when it was set up in Fortaleza, Brazil in 2014, the BRICS Development Bank was supposed to be like something that would permit for very low interest, conditionality free loans to poor countries who really just wanted to build their infrastructure, which were sabotaged by the IMF, over decades and decades. Unfortunately, it's been a slow start. And I think that's also been the same thing for the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, set up around the same time. It's a good idea, but it's been moving really slowly. The quantity of investments has been low. It has not been an alternative to the IMF. But it's what we're seeing now. I think part of that is that there's been an effort to try to play by the rules of the World Trade Organization and the IMF rules over the past 8 or 9 years by China, by Russia, who have been really desperate and hoping so much that the nations of the West could sober up, as Lavrov has said, and find their true self-interest once more, and recognize that it's better business and better profit to work with China, with Russia, on building joint projects in Africa and around the world, and even in America. We could be building our infrastructure instead of building bombs. And China is more than happy to help with those things. So is Russia. But up until now, we have chosen not to sober up. And so, I think that we're seeing finally the breaking away of the illusion that we could work with the IMF and the World Trade Center organization rules. And so it's likely that we're going to see an acceleration of a more sovereign behavior of the AIIB, as well as the BRICS Development Bank and other institutions around emitting credit the way that they were designed to and were meant to, for the purpose of ending poverty, pulling people out of scarcity and into abundance. But it's certainly what we've seen with China. And China is the economic powerhouse. Their GDP, purchasing power parity is already beyond the American GDP, per capita GDP. Purchasing power, the dollar value of the buying power of the US dollar has collapsed as the Chinese yuan has increased, with associated increased quality of life, access to education. For the Chinese, average life expectancy has now outpaced the US life expectancy by a factor of 2 years in China. And it's all through very careful, patient, but yet very quick in some ways, large-scale modernization and development that's taken what we've done in 300 years and has compressed it into a small space of maybe less than 30 years, where China has really committed to a process of creating vast abundance, which makes it difficult for the death cultists who are trying to argue that we're overpopulated to say, oh, but we have so little, we have so much scarcity that we have to adapt to. You can't really make that argument in China.
I have to interject or ask, considering you're mentioning the financial side in the IMF and the World Bank and so on, 2 questions. One, now that the West has stolen, I don't know what the politically correct term is, but stolen Russia's 300 billion reserves, and the fact that China is the biggest holder of US bonds, I'm not mistaken. How does that play into the whole reputation of this alternative currency versus the system that's been running since Bretton Woods?
Well, for those who are, again, pissing their pants, thinking that China is like their greatest enemy, these American throwbacks from the Cold Warrior days of McCarthy, who have all of a sudden been revived. On Honestly, if China wanted to destroy America, they could destroy America in a heartbeat simply by selling the $3 trillion of U.S. debt that they've been holding on to, which has been keeping an artificial demand for the U.S. dollar in play that has resulted in maintaining a non-collapse of the U.S. dollar to begin with. That is that's not going to be there necessarily forever. But if China really wanted to destroy America, they could just sell their dollar holdings and plummet the value of the dollar completely, and that would very easily unleash a chain reaction collapse function of the over-bloated, debt-riddled, speculation-driven banking system upon which the U.S. dollar is based as a big bubble. And the illusion of it having value would quickly be destroyed, as people would see that it was just a giant derivatives bubble, a time bomb sitting on unpayable debts. So honestly, China has saved the ass of every American so far alive in the United States, and those who rely upon the stability of the U.S. dollar for that matter. Now, China doesn't want global chaos. It doesn't want to destroy America. I think that's one of many good points of evidence. Another thing is that I've been a China watcher for a long time, and there's been cases of Chinese ambassadors to the United States in the year 2015, 2016, in Canada, around that same time, 2017, who have said, well, how about we take some of the U.S. dollar holdings that are not worth anything, it's just monopoly money that we're sitting on, and turn it into anti-inflationary capital. What does that mean? It means turn it into investments into the real economy of America, which is collapsing. It's dilapidated. So, China has offered to invest in building up America's infrastructure, and American businesses would vastly benefit. It wouldn't be just like another cheap labor gambit like Kissinger did to China back in the 70s. This is actually the idea of taking that useless, valueless debt and infusing value into it by forcing it to behave differently instead of just sitting there accumulating both interest and inflation. Instead of that, have it actually be put to work in order to, like this is what Alexander Hamilton did in America in the early 1790s. He took all of the Revolutionary War debt accrued to fight the British Empire in the first place, resulting in the 13 colonies, now states, being completely bankrupt and having no means of paying that debt. They had no industry in America. The British never permitted it. And Alexander Hamilton, the first Treasury Secretary, with a small grouping of people very close to Benjamin Franklin, recognized a great solution, which worked damn well, which is let's transform the state debts into a new federal debt. But the new federal debt would now behave differently, and it will be associated with building up big infrastructure projects, canals, schools, things like that, that allowed for not only the debt to be repaid very effectively and very quickly to the creditor nations of Europe, but it also allowed for the population to increase fourfold in 40 years, which freaked out the Malthusian oligarchs of Europe, who were trying to maintain the idea that, no, this is impossible. This should not be allowed to ever happen. And not just the quantity of Americans grew, but also the quality of life grew, the ability to produce more by Hamilton's emphasis on investing in manufacturing instead of just being dependent upon cash cropping of something that the British Empire is going to buy, cotton picking or wheat. Just don't do that. Do full spectrum economics. So this is what China has been doing. They've been exporting and teaching and training other leaders around the world and economists in Africa and Asia and beyond how to do this. And they've been trying to school America about the fact that this is what once made America good, was that they used to have debt that was tied to, that's the greenback system. You create a debt you get the treasury.
Okay, now you triggered me. Because first you said monopoly money when you were talking about the U.S. money, and then you said greenback, and then you triggered me because it's not green anymore, and it's not backed by gold, so there's no greenback to it at all. And this is monopoly money, and this is U.S. dollar bills. So
yes.
If anybody thinks they're taking the piss, yes, they are.
Yes.
I just wanted to draw this to people's attention because many people have not seen this. But it's worth mentioning that it is literally monopoly money. Are you there? Did you freeze? Oh, I think he froze. I think Matt froze. Are you back? Matt, can you hear me? No, I can't hear you. Matt might have frozen. Let's see if we can get him back on while we're live. Hello, hello. See. Oh, doesn't look like it. Something has gone wrong. Might have been Trudeau. So yeah, Monopoly money, everyone. Like, share, subscribe if you stuck around to here. Check out Buy Me a Coffee. Looks like Matt has been taken off the internet. Thank you for sticking around. Catch you later, everyone.